The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of vertigo and fire. The first bite of chicken, still warm and savory on my tongue, became a searing brand. My fork clattered against the plate, a distant, metallic echo. Beside me, I saw my daughter, Lily, her eyes wide with the confusion that mirrored my own, before they rolled back in her head. The gentle thud of her body hitting the floor was the last sound I registered before the darkness swallowed me whole. When I surfaced, it was to a different kind of darkness, a cold, damp one that smelled of earth and rot. My head throbbed with a rhythmic, sledgehammer-like pain. I was in a cellar, bound to a wooden chair. My mouth was dry, my throat raw. The fluorescent bulb flickering overhead cast long, dancing shadows, making the walls of the small, cramped room seem to breathe. He was there, in the corner, his face a mask of sorrowful regret. "I'm so sorry, Amelia," he whispered, his voice a ghost of the one that I had loved for 15 years. I had no choice. The words were like daggers, each one twisting in a wound I didn't even know existed. "Jason," I croaked, my voice a broken whisper. What have you done?" He didn't answer. Instead, he simply looked at me, his eyes filled with a terrifying blend of love and despair. The man who had once brought me coffee and bed, who had held my hand through the birth of our daughter, who had stood by me through every storm, was now my captor. The man I had once believed to be my protector was now my destroyer. The memory of the last few months, a slow-motion unraveling, came rushing back. The late nights at the office, the hushed phone calls, the way he flinched whenever I touched his shoulder. I had dismissed it all as stress, as the burdens of a new, demanding job. I had been so wrong. The signs had been there, painted in shades of neglect and secrecy, but I had been too blind, too in love to see them. My mind raced, scrambling for a reason, a motive. Financial ruin, an affair. The possibilities were endless and equally horrifying. The reality, I knew, would be far worse. "Lily," I breathed, the word a prayer. "Where is Lily?" His eyes, those beautiful blue eyes I had once drowned in, filled with tears. "She's safe, Amelia, I swear. She's with someone who will take care of her." The words did nothing to soothe me. They were lie, a thin veneer over a brutal truth. I knew it, in my bones. He had poisoned us, and now he was telling me our daughter was safe? The very idea was ludicrous, a cruel, sick joke. "Why, Jason?" I asked, my voice rising, my desperation a raw, ugly thing. He finally moved, stepping out of the shadows. The light caught his face, and I saw the lines of worry etched around his eyes, the deep-seated exhaustion that had become his constant companion. He looked like a man on the verge of collapse, but underneath it all, I saw a resolve, a steely determination that chilled me to the core. "It's about the past, Amelia," he said, his voice barely audible. "The past I thought I had buried. The past." The word hung in the air, heavy and full of unspoken meaning. My own past was an open book. I had no dark secrets, no hidden sins. But Jason had always been a man of quiet reserve. He never spoke of his childhood, of the years before we met. I had always assumed it was because they were painful, a time he preferred to forget. Now I realized it was because they were dangerous. He began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. "My father," he started, the name a bitter taste in his mouth. "He wasn't who you thought he was. He was part of something evil." The words were a hammer blow. Jason's father, a kindly old man with a penchant for gardening, a man I had known and loved, was now being described as part of something evil. My world, already shattered, was now being turned on its head. "He was in the mob, Amelia," he continued, his voice low and guttural. "A small-time enforcer, but still in deep. When I was a teenager, he tried to get me involved. I refused. I ran away. I changed my name, my life, everything. I thought I had escaped. A new wave of nausea washed over me. The man I had married, the man who had been my rock, my safe harbor, had been living a lie for 15 years. Our life together, the house, the dog, the perfect picket fence, it was all a carefully constructed facade. "A few months ago," he said, stopping his pacing and looking me directly in the eyes, "they found me, a ghost from my father's past, a man named Petrov. He wanted something from me, something my father had hidden away. A ledger. A ledger." The word was so mundane, so ordinary, yet it was the key to this nightmare, a book of secrets, of names and numbers, of crimes and betrayals. "I refused," he said, his voice hardening. "I told him I didn't know anything about it, but he didn't believe me. He threatened me, Amelia. He threatened you. He threatened Lily." The pieces of the puzzle were finally clicking into place, forming a picture of horror. The late nights, the phone calls, the fear in his eyes. It wasn't stress. It was terror. He had been trying to protect us, to keep us out of this dark, dangerous world. But somewhere along the way, he had made a terrible choice. "So you poisoned us?" I asked, the words a bitter, mocking whisper. He flinched, the accusation a physical blow. "No, Amelia, I would never," he said, his voice breaking. "It was a sedative, a powerful one, I admit, but a sedative. I had to make it look like we were all gone, that we were all dead. I had to make them believe I had followed through on their demands. I had to buy us time." The lie was so transparent, so pathetically thin. Why would he poison us to make us look dead when he could have simply staged a car accident, a fire, anything else? The answer I knew was in his eyes, in the way he darted away from mine. He wasn't just trying to protect us, he was trying to protect himself. "And where is Lily?" I asked again, my voice trembling with a renewed terror. "Where is my daughter, Jason?" He took a step back, his face a mask of conflict. The man who had once been my husband, my lover, the father of our child, was now a stranger, a monster born of fear and desperation. "She's with Petrov, Amelia," he said, the words a confession and a death sentence at once. The world, which had been so dark and cold, suddenly turned to ice. The truth, finally revealed, was a brutal, unforgiving thing. My husband, in his desperation, had traded our daughter's life for his own. He had poisoned me not to save me, but to buy himself time to make a deal with the devil, a deal that had cost him his soul and me, my daughter. A new kind of fire ignited within me, one of pure, unadulterated rage. It burned away the fear, the confusion, the lingering love. All that was left was a searing, consuming hatred. "You son of a bitch," I spat, the words a poison of my own. "You traded her. You traded our daughter." He hung his head, unable to meet my gaze. "I had to, Amelia. He would have killed us all. I had to buy us time. I have a plan." A plan. The word was a mockery. His plan had already cost us everything. It had cost me my daughter, my peace, my life. I looked at him, at the man who had once been my world. I saw only a hollow shell, a betrayer. The man who had sworn to love and protect me had become the very thing I needed protecting from. "You're not a hero, Jason. You're a coward, and I will never forgive you for this. Never." He looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate plea for understanding, for forgiveness, but there was none to be had. The Amelia he had once known, the woman who had loved him unconditionally, was dead. She had died on the kitchen floor with the taste of poison on her tongue and the sound of her daughter's body hitting the floor echoing in her ears. "I'm sorry, Amelia," he whispered. Again, the words a hollow echo. But his apology was empty. It was a hollow echo in a room filled with a betrayal so deep, so profound that it had consumed us both. He had made his choice, and now I would make mine. I would find my daughter, and I would make him pay. The air in the cellar was thick with the dust of forgotten lives and the scent of decay. A single naked bulb hung from a frayed wire, its stark light carving out a small, miserable stage for our tragedy. Jason stood in the middle of it all, a man unraveling, his carefully constructed lies now just so much tattered fabric. I struggled against the ropes that bound me, the rough hemp biting into my wrists. Every movement sent a jolt of pain through my head, a lingering echo of the poison. But my will was stronger than any poison. It was forged in the fire of a mother's love, a fierce protective instinct that was now my only guide. I had to get out. I had to find Lily. I scanned the cellar, searching for any weakness, any point of escape. The walls were rough-hewn stone, the floor damp earth. A small barred window was high up, just a sliver of gray light. I could hear the faint sounds of the house above me, the creak of floorboards, a low hum of electricity. It was our house, the one we had built together, the one we had filled with love and laughter. Now it was a tomb.
I thought of the man he had become. The subtle changes I had dismissed as stress now took on a terrifying new meaning. The way he had started locking his home office, a space that had always been open to me. The way he would end phone calls abruptly when I entered the room. I had chalked it up to him wanting to keep his work life separate, to protect me from his stress. Now I saw the truth. He wasn't protecting me, he was hiding from me. He was building a wall between us, a wall of secrets and lies, a wall that had ultimately become the bars of my cage. A memory from a few weeks ago surfaced, a seemingly innocent moment that now felt charged with a sinister intent. We were sitting on the back porch, watching Lily chase fireflies in the twilight. Jason had turned to me, his eyes filled with a strange, almost haunted look. "You know, Amelia," he had said, his voice low and serious, "if anything were to happen to me, I want you to promise me you'll take care of Lily, no matter what." I had laughed, swatting his arm playfully. "Don't be so dramatic, Jason," I had said. "Nothing's gonna happen to you. We're all in this together." The memory was a bitter taste in my mouth. I had been so naive. We were never in this together. He had been on his own path, a path of betrayal and deceit for months. My struggles against the ropes intensified, a primal rage giving me a burst of strength. I pushed my feet against the floor, straining against the bonds until my muscles screamed in protest. A small splinter of wood from the chair dug into my back, and I gritted my teeth against the pain. I was no longer the woman who had collapsed after a poisoned meal. I was a mother, a warrior, and I would not be defeated. I would break free, I would find my daughter, I would make him pay. With my hands finally free, the first thing I did was rub the circulation back into my wrists, the pins and needles a welcome sensation compared to the numbness. I then set about freeing my ankles, the process agonizingly slow and painful. The raw, red marks on my skin were a constant reminder of Jason's betrayal. Once free, I stood, my legs wobbly and weak, but my resolve as solid as the stone walls around me. The cellar door was a heavy, bolted thing. I pushed and shoved, but it wouldn't budge. My eyes fell upon an old, rusted iron pipe lying in a corner, half buried in a pile of sawdust. I picked it up, its weight a comforting presence in my hands. I was no longer a victim. I was a weapon. The pipe became my key, my battering ram, my instrument of vengeance. With a grunt, I began to pound on the door, the metallic clangs echoing through the house above me, a desperate, defiant symphony. The sound was a calculated risk. It would alert whoever was in the house that I was awake, that I was free. But it was a risk I was willing to take. I had no idea if Jason was even still in the house or if he had left me for dead, but I had to assume the worst. I had to assume he was there and that he would stop me. After what felt like an eternity, the bolt on the door finally gave way with a sickening thud. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading up into the unknown. I gripped the pipe tighter, my heart pounding in my chest. The house above me, the home I had loved, now felt like a stranger's house, a place of secrets and danger. I crept up the stairs, my every step cautious and silent. The house was eerily still, the silence more terrifying than any sound. I reached the top of the stairs, my head barely above the floorboards, and peered into the kitchen where our nightmare had begun. The half-eaten meal was still on the table, a gruesome still life. The chicken dish, the one he had cooked with a smile on his face, now looked like a grotesque monument to his deception. I moved silently through the house, a ghost in my own home. I checked every room, every closet, my hopes for finding Lily a painful, fruitless prayer. The house was empty. We were alone. Jason had taken our daughter and left me behind. In his study, I found the first real clue, a crack in his carefully constructed facade. A locked metal box was hidden behind a stack of books, a stack that I had never seen him touch. The box was heavy, and it resisted my attempts to pry it open. I went to the garage and found a crowbar, and with a few well-aimed blows, the lock snapped. Inside, I found not the ledger, but a stack of old letters, yellowed with age, and a photograph. The letters were from his father, written from prison. They spoke of a life of crime, of a debt owed, of a legacy that Jason, as his son, was obligated to uphold. The last letter, dated just a few months ago, was different. It spoke of a man named Petrov, a rising star in the organization, a man who had not forgotten the old debts, a man who was now coming for what he was owed. The letter ended with a chilling line. "He will not forgive a debt unpaid, my son. He will come for what you hold most dear. He will come for your family." The photograph was of a young man, a teenager, standing next to a beautiful woman with a gentle, kind smile. The woman was his mother. The teenager, with his mop of dark hair and his rebellious grin, was Jason. But what caught my eye was the man standing in the background, a shadow in the corner of the picture. He had a cruel, predatory look in his eyes, a look that sent a shiver down my spine. The man was Petrov. He had been a part of Jason's life, a part of his past, long before he had become a threat to our future. The truth was finally laid bare, a brutal, unforgiving thing. Jason hadn't just been running from his father's past, he had been running from Petrov. He had spent 15 years building a new life, a new identity, only to have it all come crashing down. And in his desperation, he had made a terrible choice. He had given up the one person he was supposed to protect above all else, our daughter. A new wave of rage washed over me, a cold, clear, all-consuming fire. I was no longer just angry, I was furious. Jason hadn't just been a victim of circumstance, he had been a co-conspirator. He knew the danger, and instead of trusting me, instead of fighting for us, he had chosen to make a deal with the devil. He had given up our daughter, our little girl, the light of our lives, to a monster. And for what? For a chance to survive? For a chance to live in a world without consequences? But I would not let him get away with it. I would not let him get away with a life built on a foundation of betrayal and lies. I would find Lily, and I would expose him. I would show the world the man he really was, the man who cooked a poisoned dinner not out of necessity, but out of a desperate, cowardly attempt to save himself. The crumpled piece of paper, the map to the ledger Jason had mentioned, was nowhere to be found. He had taken it with him, a final, cruel act of control. I searched his study again, my frustration a boiling point, but it was gone. He had left me with nothing but a house of ghosts and a heart full of broken promises. I remembered his words, the ones he had spoken with a strange mix of regret and defiance. This is the last page, the last piece of the puzzle. He held it up to the light, his hands trembling. The words, so cryptic at the time, now felt like a taunting riddle. The last page, the last piece. Where would he have hidden something so important? My mind, now operating with a chilling clarity, raced through all the places he could have hidden something so important. The old study desk? The bookshelf? The back of a picture frame? I scoured the room again, my search methodical and relentless. I pulled out every book, every folder, every drawer. Nothing. Then I remembered a seemingly insignificant detail. The old grandfather clock in the living room. It hadn't worked in years. Jason had always said he would get around to fixing it, but he never did. He just let it sit there, a beautiful, silent monument to a time gone by. Could it be a hiding place? The idea was a long shot, but I had nothing to lose. I made my way to the living room, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The clock stood in the corner, a silent sentinel. I ran my hands over the polished wood, searching for a seam, a loose panel, a hidden compartment. Nothing. But then, as I ran my hand over the clock face, my fingers brushed against the number 12. It was loose, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it was there. I pushed on the number, and with a soft click,
A small panel on the side of the clock swung open. Inside, nestled in the dark, was a small, leather-bound book. The ledger. It was here. The key to our entire nightmare, the reason for all the pain and betrayal, was in my hands. The book was heavy and smelled of old paper and leather. I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. It was filled with names and numbers, dates and locations, a chilling chronicle of his father's crimes. But what caught my eye was the last page, the one Jason had mentioned. It wasn't a map, not in the traditional sense. It was a cryptic list of addresses, a series of numbers and letters, a code that only someone with a keen eye for detail could decipher. I studied the page, my mind working furiously. The numbers, they looked like coordinates. The letters, they seemed to be a key, a way to unlock a deeper meaning. It was an elaborate puzzle, a final test left by a man who had lived his life in the shadows. He had given his son a legacy of crime and deceit, a final cruel joke from beyond the grave.